Alright, so in this video today, what I'm going to do is create a Linux client machine, and we're going to join that to an existing Windows Server Active Directory environment. Now, the first thing that we need to do is to get this up and running, we need to create a virtual machine instance. So I'm using VirtualBox, as you can see, and we'll create the virtual machine template. If you haven't already, you need to download your Linux ISO. I've got that already handy, so go and download that if you haven't already, otherwise you'll be waiting around for a while, and I'll create my machine. As you can see, I've already got an existing Ubuntu client here, which is domained to the Active Directory environment already. I'm just going to create a second machine for further testing later on in the project. So let's go File and New, Machine and New even. We will call this Ubuntu Client 2. And then the ISO, I can just select, so I've got that already. So I want the desktop version, not server. So that is desktop, yep. So select the relevant ISO. We'll skip the unattended installation. We want to do it a bit more manual. So we'll click next. Hardware, so I'd say, broadly speaking, about 25% of your physical resources should be sufficient. So I'm going to go with 4 gigs of RAM. So that's 4096. I can get it working. There we go. Processors, so I've got 8, we'll go with 2. The hard disk itself, yeah, probably 25 gig is more than sufficient. I'm not really going to use it for anything other than testing. So that's fine for now. And the default of create a virtual hard disk is the right option that we want to do. So click next. There's the summary of the machine. All looks fine to me. So I will finish there. That's our instance created. Now we want to go into the settings then, and we'll just check off a few things here. So we've got the name as we set it to earlier. We'll change that in the actual Linux OS as well, but for now that's fine. We don't want shared clipboard, leave that as it is. System, we can untick floppy, leave optical and hard disk, that's fine. Processor we changed, don't need to amend that. Display fine with storage, so we selected the ISO already, so that's looking good. Network, so what I want is, in my particular setup, I want the client joined to the Active Directory domain, and then in this domain there is 2 NIC cards. One is the internal, which I want to join this machine to, so it will be joined to the domain which is called techbeats.co.uk, and there is a second NIC on this domain controller which has a NAT on it, which means that to get to the internet, this Ubuntu machine needs to connect to the DC, and then that NIC will use NAT to go out into the internet and then respond back. So that's how it'll be connected. So the internal adapter is what we want. So initially there won't be any internet access. In fact, we'll just change this. So we enable the adapter but change it to internal, and that'll be INT-net. Now, when this machine joins, if you haven't configured your domain controller NICs in the same way I have, you won't be able to connect to the network. If what I'm doing works correctly, it should still connect to the network, but not because this is connecting to my physical router directly. It will be going through the DC. Hopefully you'll see what I mean when I actually do it. But for now, that's all we need to do. So enable the adapter. Have the network set however you want in your lab, but in my case I want it internal only, so it will join the domain only. Adapter 2, 3 and 4 won't be enabled, so we leave those as they are, and I think that's pretty much it. So click OK, and then we're ready to start this machine. What we'll also do in the background is I'll start the domain controller because we'll need that shortly, so we'll let that start and run in the background. Give it a few moments while that all powers up. Now, as long as you've connected the ISO to the Linux machine, then it'll connect directly. You won't have to press anything or do anything when it pops up with that message. What I'll do, I'll just log into my DC so it's there running in the background, and then we'll crack on with the Linux installation. Okay, the DC took a little bit longer to load this time for whatever reason, but anyway, we're here now. To unlock the machine, as you probably know, because it's a virtual machine, we need to send the command. You can't just click it as it says there, and then enter your login credential. Lovely, that's all we need to do. We just need to leave that up and running. We can minimize that now. Okay, so here's our Linux machine. While we were waiting for the server to load, Linux has already got underway and started to install. But all we did on this was connect the ISO, which we did right at the beginning, and then we'll be at this stage at some point. So let it just do its thing and it'll prompt us for some instructions in a moment. Okay, so right on cue, so we want to install Ubuntu and change your language if you have to. Mine's okay on the default. I'll just change that to my region, click continue. Happy with normal installation because I'll need some of the existing software that is listed here, so that's fine. We could download updates while installing Ubuntu. This saves a bit of time, so fine. And we'll install the third-party software because we'll need that. It'll be just a bit too limited in my opinion, so I tend to tick that. And we'll click continue. Okay, so it's got no detected operating systems, which is fine because we haven't installed one yet. So I'm happy with the erase disk and install Ubuntu. So this is only on that 25 gig hard disk that we created as part of the virtual machine instance. So it's safe to install that. Leave it at the default option. Click install now. Right, just double check that the information here populated is fine and then click continue when you're ready. Okay, it'll just check the region. Happy with mine, so click continue. So enter your details as you see fit and whatever is easier for you to recognize. And what I'll do, because I've got a machine already, I believe it's got a similar naming convention, so I'll just put a 2 here and then I know this is the second machine. So username, TechBeats, I'm happy with that, and then select a password, confirm it. So at this stage it's going to take a little bit of time. At certain stages of the video where the installation or certain tasks take a long time, what I'll do is fast forward it just so you're not waiting around too long. Now, just while this is loading, I think I'll just show you something in my setup because it probably won't be the same in yours. So just so it doesn't confuse you if you're following along, I'll show you my DC setup. So this is the primary DC, DC01 as I've called it. And what I'm going to show you is the 2 NICs that I was talking about. Okay, anytime that you try to get into adapter options and it doesn't work, you'll be able to get through it in the sharing center. Yeah, there we go. So here's the 2 NICs that I've got. So imagine these are physical NICs on the machine. If it wasn't virtual, what would happen is the way I've got it configured is a client joins the domain. Once it's connected to this particular domain, which we'll do with the Linux machine soon, is it will connect. It will only have an internal NIC on the client machine, and that will connect to this internal NIC only. So by default, it won't have any internet access. But what happens is it connects this internal NIC, so it can potentially talk to all the other clients on the domain, it can access file servers, anything else that is shared or hosted by this DC. Now, I do want client machines to have internet, but they're actually funneled through the DC. So they connect to this internal NIC. This has DHCP on it, so it gives them an IP address. And then what happens is if they want to connect to the internet, they use NAT, which is on this internet NIC, and then it goes out. So anyone from a client machine, let's just say client machine is just here, they want to visit google.com or techbeats.co.uk, what would happen is their IP will go directly to this NIC first, and then that NIC will, or the DC will use this NIC to go out to the internet and then route it back to the machine. Basically, there's 2 NICs. One is for the internal clients, server purposes only, and then there's the internet NIC as well. Cool, so going back to the Linux client machine, just seeing how it's doing. It's almost done, so probably a few more minutes, depending on the speed of your machine, and we should be done. Now, with a bit of luck, because I've connected this internal NIC, and as far as I can see, it's configured correctly. If not, we'll do a bit of troubleshooting. then this should pick up an IP from the domain controller, as I mentioned earlier. If I go back to the domain controller, what we can see is the DHCP settings, so you can see what IP it should get between a particular range. And this is how I tell it's actually working. So if we go to Server Manager, we go to Tools, DHCP, and if you want to set up the lab the way that I have, then I do have an article on how to set the lab up the way I have. So you can check it on my website or Medium. I'll leave a link in the description below. So on the DC, we'll look at DHCP. We'll click the server. So this is server name, and it's the IPv4 protocol that we're looking at. Now I've set the scope here, and here are there is the pool. So the pool is what IP a client machine would get. So it'd be anything between 172.16.0.100 up to and including 172.16.0.200. So we can check this is connected very quickly and properly by making sure that the IP that it's got is anywhere in this range. And then we have an idea that it's connected the internal NIC, got its DHCP, and it's working as we want it to. We can further double check once it is connected. We go into the leases and then we'll see the machine name here. So you can see I've got two machines there already, and that machine looks like it's connected already. So we'll go back to this machine. We're not able to check it yet, but it does look like that machine has connected already. So it's got DHCP lease has gone out about a short time ago, and I believe we did call that ubuntu.techbeats.co.uk, but we'll check it in a moment. Let's minimize out of there. We'll let the installation finish, and then we can check the configuration on the IP as well. And just press enter. Okay, so machine is back up now. So we'll click the username and enter the password we created earlier, and we'll hopefully log in. Okay, we can skip this message for the time being, and we'll skip that as well. Happy to send system info, keep that as it is, and we're done. Right, so if we go to terminal now, we just want to check the network configuration here. And easiest way is probably start typing terminal and it'll pop up. And the way that we'll check it is ifconfig. It's so new it hasn't even got ifconfig. So all we need to do is follow the instruction and install it. So that is sudo apt install nettools. You're prompted for your password, so enter that in. And in a moment we should be done. It's not a big package. We'll do the installation later. Don't need to disturb this video for that now. Okay, so that package is installed, so we'll send that command again, and now we get some details. So to check this has connected to the DC properly, we're checking that iNet. So this is that internal NIC. So it's 172.16.0.101, which is a pool, which is an IP in the pool that we looked at earlier. So that is fine. I'm happy it's receiving it. The other thing we can do is just ping the DC. So if you know its IP address, you can do it that way. And we are getting echo requests back, so that's fine. We can also do it based on the domain name, and that will prove that the DNS is working as well. So let's put that in. And as you can see, when I do that, when I cancel the techbeats.co.uk, I've also, as you're probably aware, I do actually have the website as well. So to make sure this is pinging the DC and not the website, you can see the IP address here is 172.16.0.1, which was the IP I entered earlier. So that is the IP of the DC. So that's all working fine. Now, if we want to double check in the DC, we can do so as well. And then that confirms that 101 IP was that new machine. So when it popped up on the network, it obviously got the IP address even when it was going through the setup. That's why it showed up there so soon. So come out of there now. So the NIC network configuration is all looking fine, is exactly as I want it to be. So we can move on to the next stage. Now I can also check that it's reaching the external NIC. So that's the one that I labeled internet on my DC, to make sure it can actually reach the internet. So let's ping google.com, or let's go for startpage.com. Start page, if you didn't know, it's basically Google without all the tracking. So let's ping that, see what we get back. Okay, so that is working fine now. We are getting echo requests back. And if we look at the packet loss, we can see 0 were lost. If we want to be absolutely sure, we can use the browser and see the GUI version of it. And there you go, I'm connected. So that's fine. Everything's working as it should be. Now, what we haven't yet done is join this to the actual domain. So if you're on a Windows client, what you'd do is you'd go into the option somewhere near rename your PC, and it'll say join the domain, and you'd enter it, tap in an administrator password, and then you'll get a little pop-up saying you've joined the TechBeats domain, or whatever the domain name is that you're trying to connect to. In Linux, as you can guess, it's slightly different, so this is what we're going to go through right now. So we need a package suite in order to communicate with AD, Kerberos, etc. So these are the packages that you'll need. And we'll just put a switch Y to say yes when it prompts us. Do that automatically. We want to install Realm D, SSSD, one too many, and then SSSD tools. We also want Samba-common, and then we want Kerberos, so that's KRB5 user, and then package kit, and then Samba common bin Samba libs, and then AD CLI, so Active Directory CLI. And then we'll also make sure that the time is synced, so we want the network time protocol as well. Just double checking spelling, all looks fine to me, so let's press enter, and that's underway. Right, now you should get this prompt, so configuring Kerberos authentication. Now, if you've got an instance where you're trying to follow an instruction and you're trying to join it to the domain, and it says you've got insufficient privileges, even though you're using an administrator credential, it's probably because you didn't install all the packages that I just did, especially Kerberos, because it needs that to function. So I'll give you a moment to read the message there. And it basically says, when users attempt to use Kerberos and specify a principal or username without specifying what administrative Kerberos realm that principal belongs to, the system appends the default realm. The default realm may also be used as the realm of a Kerberos service running on the local machine. It is. Often the default realm is the uppercase, so capitalized, version of the local DNS domain. So default Kerberos version 5 realm. So we need to enter this in capital letters. So techbeats.co.uk. So the field that you're trying to copy, I'll just jump over to my DC. And I think we can get into it in settings. Maybe the network. For some reason it's not working properly. But here's, if you go into the server manager, local server, the domain, that is the field that you're looking to copy, techbeats.co.uk. That's what it's after when you enter it here, but you just need to enter it in capitals and then press OK and carry on. And it will try and apply those settings now. And then once it's set the system up, we then need to physically put a request join in so it actually then connects to it. We'll just give that a moment so it can catch up with us. Okay, so that's ready. But if we just see what is available. So if you input realm, I think it's list, realm list. No, it's not connected yet. Can't do that just yet. So let's join this machine to the domain. So sudo realm join. We want to join it to the domain, which is called techbeats.co.uk. Then we're going to put the user that's going to approve the request, which will be administrator. So that administrator is anyone with admin privileges on your domain controller. So a user here who is part of the admin group, basically, because that's the user credential that needs to approve this Linux machine joining the domain. That's why it needs that domain level. Sometimes it works without it, but if you have a problem, then the likely issue is that you need a admin level user. So click enter. So the password of the administrator in that DC. So I'm going to enter that now. Okay, so couldn't join realm, insufficient permissions to join the domain. Now what this could be is a configuration in the Kerberos file. So I'm not going to keep trying that because we'll end up with the same issue. There are variations of how you put the syntax to join the realm, but I'm pretty sure I know what it is. So what you need to do is, if you have this issue with insufficient permissions to join the domain, this message itself doesn't appear very helpful because clearly our admin user has got the permissions to add someone in. So that's not the issue. Even if you were using someone with a non-admin credential, even though it's a security issue, you can actually sometimes join other machines to the network, but I think you're limited up to 10 times that can be used for. So we know it's not either of those. So by narrowing down what the issue could be, we're left with, in my view, the Kerberos config file. So type in sudo nano, and we get into it through the etc file path, and then krb5, and then this will allow us to edit the file. So if we add a field under this library defaults or lib defaults, and we'll just follow the syntax here, and we can just put the entry here. What you want to type in is DNS false, and that's it. So you press Control X and type Y for yes and press enter. That's it. We can check that is actually written to it now. If you press the up arrow, it will just input the same command, and as you can see it's still there. So Control X to come out of it. Now let's try and do that join again and hopefully prove my theory right. So we'll click enter, type the password in, and fingers crossed it joins. There we go. So Linux is one of those where if it works, it just carries on, and it'll only give you an error machine if it gets error message if it gets stuck. So if we now go to realm list, is the command I typed earlier, but it didn't do anything because it was too early. Now we should see the domain details, which we do. So the domain details are techbeats.co.uk, the type is Kerberos, realm name techbeats.co.uk, So all of those packages we installed, you can see are detailed here. Now what we can do is just have a look at this machine on the other side in the DC. So if we click type hostname, so TechBeats VirtualBox 2, and uname Linux, yep, so I want TechBeats VirtualBox 2. And if you go to the server, so what you want to do is go to Server Manager, Tools, AD Users and Computers. You then want to go to Computers, give it a moment to refresh, and you'll see all the machines that are joined to the domain. You can see an existing Linux machine which I had there before, and the one that I've just connected joined to the domain now is this one here, TechBeats, and you can't see the full name, but if we click it, you can see DNS name TechBeats VirtualBox 2, and if we go over to the Linux machine, you can see under hostname TechBeats VirtualBox 2. So that confirms everything is connected properly, and this Linux machine is joined to the domain. So that's everything done. Hope you found it useful. Thanks for watching.